this video, we will compare the steps required to set up, run, and validate a simple but typical task of extracting detailed information from medical reports using both SiMX TextConverter 4 and Datawatch Modeler 12, also known as Monarch Pro. Originally, we had planned to begin with Modeler, but the configuration process in Modeler appeared to be so much longer than in TextConverter that we opted to start with TextConverter instead. The difference is apparent. 3 short and intuitive steps in TextConverter versus a minimum of 18 steps in Modeler, some of which are confusing and can easily introduce extraction error. So let's start with TextConverter. Step 1. Loading an input file in both tools can be accomplished using the Open File dialog, but in TextConverter, the input file can be dragged in from Windows Explorer. Step 2. Once the input file is loaded, we need to set up the data extraction template. In TextConverter, this task is solved by one simple step. Simply right-click on the line with the data to be extracted and select the Set Fields from the selected line item in the context menu. This configures the template, which creates input and output data fields, as well as identifies the input records for extraction and generates output records from them. Step 3. To make the output a little more readable, we want to set more usable field names. This process takes only one step for all fields in TextConverter compared to 3 steps per field in Modeler. Again, simply right-click on the line with the field names and select the Assign Field Names item from the context menu. That's it. Now the field names are set for both input and output dictionaries. Another thing to note about TextConverter is that both input and output previews, as well as input and output dictionaries, are fully synchronized with each other. This makes it very easy to visually confirm the extraction results, as well as significantly improving the workflow efficiency. Now we will attempt to produce the same extraction result with Modeler as we just did with TextConverter. Step 1. Unlike TextConverter, in Modeler you cannot drag the file from Windows Explorer, but have to use the Open File dialog instead. We will use the recent files to save time. Step 2. In order to start configuring a template, we need to switch to Report Design mode. Step 3. Selecting a sample line for trap generation. The result of this selection is very important because it is used to define the record detection criteria based upon the behavior or position of each character. At the same time, the number of lines available for sampling is limited. As a result, mistakes in record selection are highly probable. For example, let's select the same line that we did with TextConverter and see what happens. Step 4. Adding a new template. Adding a new detailed template is accomplished by selecting the Detail option from the New Template Tools ribbon button. The result of this action adds the selected string as a sample string highlighted in yellow at the top of the preview pane. The order in which steps 2 and 3 are performed can have a significant impact on the following steps as well as the final outcome. Step 5. Open the Auto-Define Trap dialog. Clicking on the Auto-Define Trap button opens an additional dialog designed to attempt to guide the user through the record sample selection process. This is accomplished by checking or unchecking the lines that should or should not be included as records. This overly simplified process contains the potential for significant margins of error. Step 6. Accepting changes by clicking on the Accept button generates the trap expression at the top of the preview pane. The captured lines are marked with the double arrow symbol at the left margin of the preview. Step 7. Auto-Define Fields. This routine generates the fields and the rules for positional data extraction based upon the selected sample line. If the original sample line we selected was not generic enough, some records could be incorrectly omitted from this extraction. This is likely to introduce errors and should be checked against the available data and corrected. Step 8. Verifying correctness of the trap. To make sure that the created trap captures the correct records, the user has to scroll down and visually verify the correctness of highlighted lines. Performing such verification without seeing the fields is extremely difficult and likely to produce unreliable results. As you can see in this image below, one of the records was not captured correctly. Step 9. Fixing the trap. To fix this problem, the user has to either cancel the generated template and start all over again using a more representative line, or start editing the trap expression manually, which requires much more experience to do so. We will correct the trap expression manually by removing one of the trap symbols. Step 10. Modifying the field's width to include the field's values. This is a risky operation that requires intimate knowledge about the data. For example, if you make the field too long, it could start extracting extraneous bits of data not intended by the user. In TextConverter, the field width is detected automatically by analyzing the entire file. Steps 11 through 15. Naming the fields. Unlike TextConverter, setting field names in Modeler must be performed manually for all the fields, one by one. For each field, there are 3 sub-steps. A. Selecting the field. B. Entering the field's name. And C. Applying changes by pressing Enter or clicking on the Accept button. In our case, we have to name 5 fields, which adds at least 5 more steps, or 15 if you're counting sub-steps, to the workflow. Just imagine how much work would be required to manually set the names for a large number of fields. Step 16. Updating and verifying the output preview. In contrast to TextConverter, where the output preview gets updated automatically and shows combined data for all templates at all times, Modeler requires you to manually refresh the preview and only shows data for the currently selected template. Step 17. Accepting changes and viewing the identified fields and records highlighted on the input document preview. Unlike TextConverter, that offers you a combined input and output preview with synchronization highlighting of the selected field, any changes needed force you to switch to Report Design View, apply your changes, and then return to the input preview to validate your changes. Step 18. The final step is to view the tabular output of the final results. This is done by selecting the Table tab. Again, unlike TextConverter, there is no synchronization between the final output and the input preview. So, ask yourself which method you would prefer. 3 short, intuitive, and reliable steps that will take less than 30 seconds, or over 18 confusing steps with a higher potential to produce incorrect results that will take you more than 5 minutes.